So welcome, everyone. Glad to see some of your lovely faces. I can't see MFAs, but I would be glad to see yours too if it was on MFA. Excuse me while I get some water. My throat is a little sore. Layla was like, are you going to be able to cover for me? Because I told her this morning I had a sore throat. But we're hanging in. So any quick announcements from the board before we jump in? I didn't get anything from Layla, so I'm just rolling with it tonight.
Yes, let's see. I know there was a couple of things to discuss. I think Elizabeth and Madeline and I had a discussion. I haven't checked my email. I think we're going to work to try and come up with some good programs or speakers and have some good ideas. And I think that's, let me think here. I can't think of anything else.
Okay. Very cool. Do you have any member socials coming up? I did not check the list.
No, we have our next event, our next networking group. I think it's 2 weeks from now.
Yep.
I don't have anything planned for it. I'm open to ideas.
That's okay. We will come up with something. Since a lot of the people here are on the board, just a reminder, this month we are back on schedule, our board meetings. So make sure that's on your calendar. If you don't see it on there, hit up Delane so she can send you the invite. But we will have lots and lots to discuss because we haven't fully officially met since October. So it's been a little while. So keep an eye on that. Make sure you're ready to discuss anything for the second half of the year. Especially you, Clayton, we should have invoices for second half of the year.
That's what, yep, they're coming. I'm going to get to them this weekend. It's on my calendar, big circle around it.
Awesome.
So, yeah, I was going to say that. Thanks.
Oh, you muted yourself.
Well, I didn't have anything else to say. I said, yeah, thanks for reminding me. That's it.
Awesome.
I did have another announcement. It finally occurred to me. I think we have a district. Our district has a banquet, a recognition banquet on February the 4th, I believe. And let's check. Yes. And so is anyone who's planning to attend or could attend? I think I could attend if I had to, although it's in Longview. But I think our club needs to be represented and talk about the great things we've done.
I can assure you that I will unfortunately not be there.
What was the date on
that? We believe it's February 4th. I'm pulling up the district site to.
It's the 4th. That's a Saturday.
All right. I think it's a dinner banquet. So is there anybody else who can attend with me? Anyone in Longview area? All right.
We can definitely get a reminder out to the club foundation banquet. 6 to 8 p.m. On February 4th at Pinecrest Country Club. So actually drove by there the other day when I was in Texas.
Sarah, may you drop that in the chat?
Yes, I will drop the link to that so you can get all the details.
Sure. I might be able to. I was planning, I might go see my parents that weekend, and they live close. So no firm commitment, but I might be able to swing that if that's the case.
Well, if we do attend, and I think they may call on the district, each club to make some comments. And if I would prefer Layla have something for me to read to talk about the accomplishments of the club. So I would speak on I would deliver a message on her behalf.
Yeah, and she may be able to go to that as well. She's not too terribly far from Longview, so that may be an option for her as well.
Where does she live?
She's in Texarkana, but I don't know off the top of my head the Riley dates. I don't think that's a Riley weekend, is it?
All right.
Okay, cool. Good deal. Well, Alrighty. Anything else before we introduce our guest?
One other thing, I'm sorry. The DEI, if you can make the DEI committee, I don't know the next date. I'll find out about that. But if you can devote some time, it's typically on a Thursday at 6 by Zoom. Fabulous committee, fabulous program, but it's a way to try to help Rotary become more current, more embracing, build membership. As I've talked to you before, there's resistance in our district, but there's some good people who are working on this, and I think with the right kind of discussion, it could be something that moves our district forward. So be alert to that. If you can participate, it's a good thing to do.
Yeah. That's very fitting with the 2023-2024 Rotary theme that was just announced, I believe, yesterday, which is Create Hope in the World. So this year is Imagine Rotary. Next year is going to be Create Hope in the World. So lots of hope comes from our diversity and inclusion.
And by the way, I want to remind you, I mean, we're an international club. I'm calling you from Manchester in the UK. I went to a Rotary Club in Manchester this evening. So it's midnight here, my friends. So.
Wow. Well, thanks for staying up late for us, Wes. I know it is well past your bedtime.
Very much so, yes. All right.
Awesome. All right. Well, Wes, are you going to be introducing Jill for us tonight?
I am, yes.
I will pass it over.
Yes, indeed. Thank you so much. I have her biography. I'm somewhat familiar with Jill, and so, but I'll give you her highlights because it's succinct and well done. Jill Sheley is a native of Texas. She's a graduate of the fine university down on the Brazos River, known as Texas A&M University. She has a BBA in accounting. She worked 5 years as an auditor and consultant with an international accounting consulting firm in Houston. That's Arthur Andersen. She then moved to Seattle with Arthur Andersen initially to serve clients in the Pacific Northwest. Since founding her management consulting company, S2 Advisors, in 1997, Jill has delivered value to clients by guiding strategic and tactical business planning and implementing complex process and technology improvements. Along with her husband, Jill moved to Winthrop, Washington in 2009 to run around with her twin boys on the ski slopes and down the slopes of the Loop and on the mountain biking trails all over the Metro Valley. I think she skied this morning, in fact. She's a member of 3 book clubs. She founded the junior golf program at Bear Creek. She serves as a treasurer of the Confluence Art Gallery in Twisp. And she has volunteered as a Nordic ski coach, an alpine race coordinator, a guardian angel, and a high school English tutor. And as much as she loves the Valley's trails, her heart belongs to the community of Winthrop in the Metro Valley. She strongly believes in the power of public spaces to draw people together and envisions a library in which every single person feels welcome and delighted to enter the front door. She's going to talk with us this evening about the concept of how to solve complex problems, something that all of us can translate to everything we do. The context of the solving problems has to do with the building from scratch of a new public library in rural north central Washington. It involved in community engagement, public partner advocacy, stewardship, administration, and a $7 million capital campaign, design, and construction. And she succeeded. She and her team succeeded. And she's going to talk with you about how she accomplished this and show you principles so that when you are tasked with solving a really complex problem, a lot is on the line, maybe you can apply some of these concepts. So Jill, thank you very much.
Thank you, Wes. I am delighted to be here. Thank you all. Obviously, every one of you cares about your community. And so I'm going to talk to you about a community project and hopefully share some lessons learned through this project that definitely address problem solving. So let me see if I'm able to share. I am now. Thank you. And I've got just a few slides here to give you a background on the project. Tell me when are you all able to see this?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Presentation mode. So the problem that we had in a nutshell is that our rural community, and I'll show you a map where when I say rural, I mean rural. We do not have any public places for our community together, other than the existing library, which was really essentially a double wide trailer, intended to be temporary for 12 years until our project came along. It was intended to be temporary and it lasted 12 years. There's no place for our community together other than the existing library and the school system. If you want to get together, if you want to come together and in community, you have to pay for it. You have to either go to a coffee shop or a wine bar or a store or someplace. There's no community, there's no public places in our valley prior to this project. And so our problem that we had to solve was how do we build a modern facility, a modern library in a town of about 500 people? And that's what I'm going to talk to you about, how we did that. So let me just tell you a few facts about, it's called the Methow Valley. Winthrop is one of 5 towns, small towns that sits in a 80-mile long valley in north central Washington. So if you kind of see the map, that star is where we are. We are nestled just on the eastern slopes of the North Cascade Mountain Range. We have, as of now, after about 6,000 full-time residents in the entire valley. The town of Winthrop itself has about 500 people. The other towns have similar amounts, and then there's lots of people who live outside of incorporated towns, including me. It's a low-income area built on agriculture, tourism, recreation, fisheries, but there are pockets of very high wealth. So we draw, it's a destination area, drawing high income earners from primarily the western side of Washington, from the Seattle area. 4 beautiful seasons. We have 200 kilometers of trails that are maintained year round for skiing, for mountain biking, for hiking, for walking. The town of Winthrop itself is a theme town. It's a Western town, which will be relevant in just a minute, with boardwalks and Western storefronts, and draws hundreds of thousands of visitors a year. It's a very beautiful place. I'm happy to live here. So I'm going to talk to you about why we needed a library. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the project and then spend most of the time on how we did it. And this is short, and I'm happy to take questions, just interrupt if you need to. And definitely, I think there's time to cover more. So why a library? We needed, as I mentioned, a hub for the middle and upper valley. Oops, sorry about that. 23 miles of service territory, rural area with no place for anybody to come together. We love our library. Our existing library, which was very inadequate, about 1,000 square feet, still had in our library district the highest circulation, meaning the most books checked out of any of the 30 branches that are part of our library association, and the 3rd highest program attendance, despite our tiny little old library. We are part of a 30 branch library district called North Central Washington Libraries. And what that means is the towns, these 30 branches, the towns provide the building, and the library district, which is tax funded, provides the books and the staff and the computers and all the things that make it a library. But the facilities are provided by the local communities. So the current location that Winthrop had for its library, very inadequate, no place to sit. I don't have time, I could show you pictures, but just really not intended to be long-term. What we're seeing, especially with COVID, huge divide between urban and rural areas in terms of technology access. 30% of our valley, and I think it's probably higher than that, don't have access to broadband, and 30% of children can't do their homework. They can't do anything online because their families can't afford for broadband access. And half of our population, half of our student population, is below the poverty line on free and reduced lunch. Like I mentioned, a very broad, low income area. but with pockets of wealth. We're also an growing elder population. Half of our valley is over 50 years of age, no public place to come together, a lot of isolation for seniors, for young mothers, for those living, in rural areas. And again, when I give these talks, I like to ask everybody to think about what a library might mean to you and what it has meant to you in your life. What has the library done for you? And imagine not having that in your life. And that's the situation that we were in. So our project was to create a central, visible, walkable, accessible library connected by public transportation in proximity to other assets in the valley, like our early childhood education center, our old folks home, the town trailhead. We have an ice rink right across the street from the library. So a very central location. And you can see this, the way this picture is laid out. The library sits on one lot, and just to the left of that, where you see a parking lot and a green space area, that's a separate lot. So when we started this project, we only had the library lot. We actually raised more money to buy the adjacent lot so we could have parking for the library. So we started out with about a $4.5 million budget, which grew to over $7 million. And that's not because of cost increases. That's because we were extremely successful in telling this story and raising money and doing more. So we were very disciplined about sticking to our budget, but as we raised more money, we expanded the scope of the project. We were able to get a $2 million grant from the state of Washington. And that the way that grant worked, we actually initiated the grant. So our project, this grant, this money did not exist until we went to the state legislature and we lobbied for them to set money aside for rural libraries. So it was part of our project was to initiate the state grant, which other libraries throughout the state now can take advantage of. So that's a real legacy of this project, is that we were able to set money aside in our budget for other rural libraries besides our own. But we had to, from the time the grant started, this was another problem. From the time the grant started, it was essentially a matching grant. So we had to, kind of a matching grant, it's a little more complicated than that. But we had 2 years to not only raise the matching funds, we actually had to raise $2.5 million before we could access the state's money. We had to raise $2.5 million and spend $4.5 million in 2 years. That was a big, big challenge. And we did it. So our library sits right in town. It's adjacent to all these accessible places, right on a trail, accessible by every mode of transportation, and has this green space next to it. So just to give you a little sense of what we're talking, it's 7,300 square feet. Here's the timeline that we were working on. We obtained our 501c3 status, our nonprofit status, in late summer of 2017. We spent 18 months, and this is definitely something I would share if you're ever going to do a big project like this, a very broad and deep needs assessment. That means we talked to everybody. We sent surveys out. We went to the town council. We held hopes and dreams workshops. We went and met with the old folks. We met with the young folks. We met with the young techs. We met with families. We met broadly across our community to ask, what do you want a library? Is this just our idea? Or is this something that our community actually wants? And overwhelmingly, our community did want it and expressed that strong desire. And in January of 2019, we presented to the town of Winthrop Council and said, well, this nonprofit will take on the effort of building a library, but you've got to put some skin in the game, town, that you got to buy the land. And so the town of Winthrop closed on the parcel of land, about a little less than an acre. They bought that parcel of land in January of 19. And by May of 19, by the way, we have no money at this time, other than seed money from a few donors. We have no money, but we have ambition and a big dream. in May of that year, I was hired as the executive director. So as Wes mentioned, my background, I am a consultant. I'm a management consulting and have done consulting my whole career, but kind of was ready to do something different. And I saw this opportunity to become the head of this organization, the director, and started in May of 2019. At that time, an architecture team was hired, and we started the ball rolling on what are we even talking about here? What are we building? How big is it? How much is it going to cost? And that summer, we were able to close on the matching funds or get approved for the state capital grant. And that really launched our capital campaign. Then we knew, okay, we got a project here. We're going to go for it. We have to go raise. With the architects, they do some very high level drawings, and we're able to get a preliminary budget. And we thought that budget was going to be about $4.5 million. And so we set out to raise $2.5 million. So at $2 million in state funds, $2.5 million that we would privately raise, we could build a library. And so that's what we did. We started talking to donors. And then all of a sudden, everybody's world turned upside down and a pandemic started right as we were breaking ground in 2020. We broke ground on the new library. We had raised enough money to start construction. So we started construction without having the full budgeted funds. We continued to raise money. We continued to design, manage the construction, and we opened our library pretty much on schedule in June of last year. We were about 3 months later than we had planned, but given everything that was happening, and we were pretty much on budget. So our library's been operational for 6 months now. This is what it looks like. So it's a barn. Everything in Winthrop, we actually have a town committee called the Westernization Committee that approves every single building, every storefront, every sign, everything that is visible from the street has to be approved by the town's Westernization Committee. And so our architects worked and developed this hay barn. It looks like a lot of barns that are around our valley. On the left-hand side, and I'll show you some more pictures of this, there's community meeting rooms that have separate entrance and exit and can be used outside of library hours. And on the right side is the library part of the building. This is just a view of the architecture renderings. And now that it's built, it actually kind of looks like this. This is the library, what it looks like on the inside. There's a big children's area, space for computers. There's a young adults area. There's an old adults area. That's my spot around there's a fireplace. There's beautiful art, which I wish I could show you, but it's a beautiful building. This is, again, some more images. On the left there is it's the entry area, which now has an exhibit of books that have been transformed into birds that are flying in the rafters. We have barn doors with every single donor's name on the barn doors as you welcome into the library. There's a children's nook area, special children's area, and then the community meeting rooms, which are very, very, very popular. Because again, our community had no place to meet. We're a very active, intentional community with, I think, something like 97 nonprofits that serve all kinds of needs in the valley. And so they had no places to meet until our library was built. So our meeting rooms are very popular. All right, so here's what we accomplished. We reached out and were able to reach 1,000 individual donors. So that's more than 1,000 individual. And this, again, our town is 500 people. And our whole valley is 6,000 people. So we're just talking about the upper end of that valley. We were able to connect with over 1,000 individual donors, individual family units. We had, out of that $7 million that we ultimately raised and spent, fully balanced, fully transparent financials. Very, very proud that we very well managed project. We're only 1% over our budget, our construction budget, despite in the midst of all the supply chain issues and all the chaos that the pandemic represented. Amazing, amazing accomplishment. We were able to also build to LEED Silver environmental standards. So that's I think that's a universal environmental standard that says, you know, it's a sustainable building for 100 years. We had a very stable board. Our board stayed with the exception of one retirement during the course of the project. Our 9-member board was very committed to the project and stable and stayed with the full project and fully committed to the project. We raised an additional $2.5 million beyond our initial budget, allowing for expanded scope. So, you know, our first budget, we cut it to the bone. It's called value engineering to get down to what we thought we could raise. So our first budget didn't have landscaping. It didn't even have hardscape. It had no parking lot. It had nothing. It didn't have a special children's area. There's a lot of things that we had to cut out of our original budget that we were fortunately able to add back in. And we had a very active, engaged volunteer base.
Jill, did you have any resistance to the concept at any point?
Oh yeah, we definitely did. So I mentioned that this project was kind of serving that 23 miles of service territory, and our valley is a long, narrow valley, and so we targeted the mid and the upper valley. The lower end of the valley, there are people who said, why do we need a library? A lot of people don't understand the need for a library. You can get your books on Amazon. You can get ebooks from your library. Why do you need who goes and checks out a hard copy of a book? Well, turns out lots of people do. Lots and lots of people still very much want a book in their hands. But even more than a library being a building where you can check out books, it is a place where people come together. It is a place for community. So these community meetings that happen, these mothers groups and parent groups, family meetings. I've had my twin sons tell me that, who are seniors in high school, that their cool friends now hang out at the library, because before there was, I mean, honestly, there's no place to hang out for for teens in our valley. No safe place other than the ice rink. I will say that kids who play hockey have a place to go, but if you're not playing hockey, there's no indoor place really to hang out. There's no place for old people to come together and sit and talk. There's tech workers, you know, people who work remotely. They come and they just want to work in the library. We have the best broadband in the valley, and they can come, they can access resources. There's a huge amount of resources that the library offers. Classes. I'm actually attending a class that starts tomorrow, a 10-week class on the history of Russia and Ukraine, that's going to be held in that community room. And our library has resources around those topics. So a huge amount of things that a library offers, but a lot of people don't realize that. And we had people, lots of people down at the other end of the valley saying, you know, we need a pool more than we need a library. This is too expensive. You know, we're outgrowing our britches. We don't need something this fancy. What was wrong with our old library? Lots of naysayers.
And what is the reason for the naysayers? I mean, did you learn any lessons or make any observations about overcoming resistance, and what comprises it, and how do you deal with it?
Some people thought that and no matter how many ways and how many times you tell people their taxes are not going to be raised, this project had zero implication to people's taxes. People still think, and they write letters to the editor, we don't need this project. We don't need another big government, you know, spending our tax money. This is not this. In fact, people in our community already pay taxes for library services. It's, if you get your tax statement, there's a little thing along with your garbage and your cemetery district, your library district is on our tax statement. But because of our insufficient library, we were not able to get our money back out of it. We couldn't get the services that we were paying for. So we tried to communicate that to folks. Look, you're not going to pay more in taxes. You're actually going to get what you're paying for. And people still would say no. And so what I learned through that is you just got to let them go. You just have to, you do your best, you be honest, you transparent, you run a good project, and you're just not going to get everybody on board. And that's okay.
How did you go about identifying points in the legislature and the state government in order to get the $2 million? How did you come up with that idea?
That's a great
How did
question.
you implement it?
That's a great question. Again, this is a very popular project. That needs assessment, again, I can't, and I should have put it in the lessons learned, but the needs assessment was critical to this project because it not only identified the need, it evangelized the project. It got a lot of people's attention. And one of the people who heard about this project through our needs assessment was a go-getter in our town who knew somebody who knew a state legislator. Not even our own state legislators, not even our representatives, somebody on the west of the Seattle area contacted them and said, this is a public project. How do we get public money for this? How would we do this? Wasn't even on our organization's radar. It was one of we call them friends because we are the Friends of the Winthrop Public Library as our organization. One of our friends reached out to a state legislature, a state representative who said, well, this is what you have to do. And we had about 2 weeks to complete all of this information so that you can put funding requests into the legislature. But it's kind of an onerous process. You have to gather a lot of information. And we worked around the clock and submitted an application for funding to the state legislature, and they approved it. And again, not just for us, but rural libraries as a whole. We knew to be successful, we couldn't just talk about Winthrop. We had to talk about rural communities as a whole. And Washington's a rural state. We are a blue state primarily because of the Seattle-Tacoma area, but we are landmass wise, probably 75% rural, maybe more. And so we had to sell it that way, that this benefited more than just our own individual community. And we were awarded, and I think we asked for $3 million and we got $2 million.
I have a
Go ahead, Clayton.
Okay. So how did you persuade over 1,000 individuals to donate? What was the groundwork for that? I'm curious.
Great question. This is kind of getting into the lessons, which is fine. So one thing I can't stress enough that was super invaluable to us was a strong board. We had a very good board, a working board, and we knew we needed to get the right skills on our board. It couldn't just be do-gooders in the community. We have plenty of those. We love do-gooders, but we needed people with hard skills. And we need people, like one of the skills that we needed was marketing and PR. And so we had a crackpot marketing and PR person on our board. She's still on the board. She's amazing. And we had other people who were great at fundraising, who had a lot of experience fundraising. And so we had 3 primary committees, a capital campaign committee, a design and construction committee, and a marketing and outreach committee. So those were our 3. We also had finance and stewardship, but those are not very exciting. But between the capital campaign committee and our marketing and outreach committee, we worked together to develop the message. And so very important to create a compelling case. So I mentioned just a few of the reasons. We had the top 10 reasons for why we needed a library. We would take that, we would tailor it to different audiences to create a urgent, compelling message that resonated. And then we marketed it. We had really good marketing, both digital marketing, print copy, and just, meeting. I've had coffee with hundreds of people talking about this project. Our board, every person on our board is expected to fundraise. That was part of the deal. And you're signing up. We had to raise a lot of money in a short amount of time. We also, we had our newspaper. We have one newspaper, one community newspaper, and the editor of the newspaper, very big proponent of the project. And he publicized it a lot, free publicity in the newspaper. So we just did, traditional marketing, just print, media, outreach. I mean, just and full on.
You added. Yeah.
And it's a compelling story. Again, it was a really compelling story. The other thing that, was a little bit outside of our control, but was a huge benefit for us, our librarian is a well-loved member of our community. And she, of course, we're going to build a new library for Sally. Sally was the librarian for 34 years. And so, she was a key person that people wanted to support.
It's good. Is she still there?
Well, no, she retired right as the project was started. She retired. We have a new librarian.
Oh,
But we set a goal. That was the other thing. We said we wanted 1,000 donors. And when I honestly did not think that we would meet it. When we set the goal, we had about 115 maybe. And I'm like, yeah, right. We're going to get 1,000 donors. We did one of the things I mentioned, and I wish I could show, I don't have time to take me too long to find the picture. We have a beautiful, huge barn doors that have a big art in the middle of them. And around that art is the name of every single donor. Wes, your name is on there, yours and Donna. That we had to, it took they needed 6 months to fabricate these doors. And so again, we did a media blitz and said, look, if you want your name on this door, got to give now. And it's got to be at least $20. And to get your name on the door, we got tons of donors. And again, not just at the $10 and $20 level. We actually got, most people gave, for that during that campaign, $100 to $250 to get their name on the door, because it's permanent, and you can go find your name amongst 1,000 people. Or again, it's when I say 1,000, like a couple would be one donor. You could find your name on that door. So that was an incentive.
What type of conflicts developed on your leadership board, and how did you resolve those?
Surprisingly few. I mentioned it. We have a very committed board. Our board chair, her name is Shannon Polson, and we called her the force because she's a force to reckon with. Shannon had the vision from the beginning and is a very, 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 very committed, strong-willed person. The first time when this project first got started, the members, Shannon created a board of do-gooders, and after a very short time, all those people quit because they couldn't take Shannon. Shannon's a big force of nature, and so we knew, we learned then that we needed strong people on the board committed to this mission, no matter what. And so the only conflicts that we really had on the board had to do, quite honestly, with working with Shannon, because she's so strong-willed. And there was a ton of mutual respect. We had a rule that you don't say anything bad about another board member. And we all held to that rule. So there's no backtalk, there was no background, there was no side deals, it was all transparent and upfront. And our marketing person and Shannon kind of clashed a lot. And I asked our marketing person, her name is Boo, why do you do this? Because they butted heads. And it's because they're both so good and strong-willed. And I'm like, why are you doing this? This is a lot of work and it's not fun. And she said, because library saved her life as a teenager. She was committed to the vision enough to work through those interpersonal board challenges. And it wasn't like that, although I'm kind of making that sound worse than it was. There were just a few moments of conflict. But really, that was it. Full commitment. Everyone kept their eye on the same target and rowed the boat together. So I'd say that was, again, a key lesson is shared vision. All right, so what Wes asked for 5. Oops. Oh, I was just going to tell you one more thing. So we have another campaign in progress right now, just to give you, we're putting solar on the south facing roof. So this building will be fully sustainable. We're going for this public funding for this as well. I'm not sure. I'm actually no longer the executive director, so I don't know the status of this, but I believe there's infrastructure, funding for this and we'll have to raise private money, but also public money to fully install solar on the south roof. So that's still going. All right. So lessons that learn. I'm just gonna check time. Asked for 5 and I just couldn't get it to 5. And I kind of fudged and did 6 and combined some things. But in terms of, again, facing a big problem or a big challenge, think big, go big, and don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to go big. Think big. I credit our board chair for having this grand, huge vision. I mean, no one ever thought that we would be able to pull off a project in this tiny little place. But Shannon believed, and we all believed because of it. And we held to it by having a complete 1000% focus and dedication to that vision. We had very highly skilled board members. We strategically used volunteers and consultants, both paid and volunteer. We had the right people on the right seats of the bus, all telling the same story. So we were truly all together dedicated. This was not, I could not, with absolute honesty, this was not my win or my success story. It wasn't Shannon's success story. This truly was a team effort. Wouldn't it, if we hadn't had our marketing person, we wouldn't be successful. We didn't have our design construction expert, we wouldn't have been successful. We had truly talented board who worked very hard. The sense of urgency, I mentioned that state grant. While that was a big challenge, it also made for a very compelling story, because we could go to donors and say, we need your commitment now, because if we don't get the matching funds, we lose $2 million. We don't get that state money. So, and we have to raise it and spend it in 2-year biennium, a budget biennium. Truth be told, we could have probably gotten an extension, but we didn't want to get an extension. We wanted to maintain, we purposely told people we will lose that state money if we don't get the matching funds now. And so the other thing that, and that was a very, again, that got those 1,000, that got people on board, like, oh, I got to do this now. We took pledges. I'm very happy to say just today, I issued a report. We had, I think at one time, over $1 million in pledges, and only had one defaulted pledge out of, I don't know how many we had, a lot. But holding to deadlines, there were a lot of naysayers. We had a lot of partners in this project. So the town of Winthrop was a partner. We gifted the library. So my organization is a nonprofit. Once we completed construction, we gifted the building and the grounds to the town of Winthrop. So the town maintains the library going forward. So they were a key partner. The library district is a key partner, the ones who put the books on the shelves and hire the staff. And there was a lot of hesitancy to commit to deadlines, like, for example, our grand opening deadline. Again, happening during the pandemic, we had a delay on overhead lights that had a cascading effect on our ability to open the doors on June 20th, which was or June 11th, sorry, which was our grand opening date. And a lot of people wanted to push out the grand opening date. And I will take credit for this, that I held firm. It's like, no, our grand opening, whether we have lights or carpet or books on the shelves, we are opening the doors on June 11th. And that rallied the troop. We got everybody like, okay, we're going to make it happen. And it did happen. So holding fast to deadlines was, I think, key. Having a good, strong process and infrastructure. We had a very stable, strong, disciplined governance process. We had the committees. Nothing was decided independently. There was no back office decision-making, or everything was above board, very structured, strong governance. Like I mentioned, we managed the money well. We had all this organizational foundation. We had strong systems. Every single donor, for example, got a handwritten thank you letter within 2 days, usually within 1 day of donating. We had a process for that. And so we had strong processes, strong accounting, strong tools where we communicated. For a while, we used like a Slack type tool, but we have older people on our board who just couldn't get the gist of it. But so we worked other tools. Good banking relationships, good document sharing, just good solid foundation. And then lastly, again, about the naysayers, keep your blinders on. Don't be waylaid. There are always going to be people who will naysay your efforts. There will always be those people. And those are the people who are not getting things done. So just go forward. And we celebrate. We celebrated a lot. We're very happy. It's a beautiful space, and it's used. It's used every time I'm in. Every area of the library has people in it. It's going to be one of those things where people ask, how do we survive without it? How did we create the strong community? And we also, I'll say one last thing, about the library. It's a hub for a lot of different things that happen. Think of it as infrastructure. Like you build the infrastructure for other things to happen. Our library is a key infrastructure in our rural community.
Jill, on this call are a variety of men and women. Many of them are at the early stages of their career. Andrew's in law school. Elizabeth is going to be she's a PhD student. She's going to be, professor or researcher or teacher somewhere. We have one person, Sarah, I believe, works for USA Today. We have project managers, and Andrew is in the Air Force, probably going to be an officer one of these days. How do these lessons, in your view, it's not likely anybody on this call may go build a library. How are these lessons transferable to other projects or other complex tasks that we might be called upon to perform?
Gosh. I feel like I'm a business consultant, and I feel like these lessons apply to every project I've ever worked on. Anytime you are implementing change, anytime you are adopting something new, addressing a problem or an obstacle, I think these lessons apply. I would almost ask your group here, Wes, like, how could you see these things helping in whatever professional or challenge you're facing? Because I can, again, every project I've ever worked on requires these things. Strong attention to process, strong vision, strong leadership.
Well, that's a very good question. Let me ask the group. Does anybody have questions or comments about how any of these concepts apply in what you are doing, expect to do, or have done?
I think the thing that jumps out to me first is the process and maintaining a process. I know in a lot of the work that I do, I work in academia and everything is run on an academic year cycle. And once that academic year ends, you get a whole new crop of people who are going to come in and theoretically maintain status quo, but it never ends up happening that way. So kind of when you're in these positions, how can you influence other people to, yes, put your fingerprints on it, but don't overhaul something that doesn't need to be overhauled?
Yeah. I always say, well, first of all, you need to have, your organization needs to have a process, because a lot don't have a process. So then it's easy to go rogue and for people to kind of do their own thing and make back office deals. And so first off, establishing a process, again, for whatever your organization does is key. And then your leadership has to maintain discipline towards that process and not allow, just enforce compliance with it. So I would say those two things: make sure that you develop good, solid processes that continually improve, because all processes need to change and improve, but develop them and require compliance with them. Our leader, Shannon, the board chair, she was a super strong stickler that nothing happened outside of our committee work. Every decision, Shannon didn't make unilateral. I didn't make unilateral decisions. Everything had to come through a committee and then go to our full board for ultimate decision making. Nothing was done. So that was one of our processes that was required. Our donor development process. We had you don't just go up to somebody and ask them for $10,000. There's a process that you go through to develop major donors. And we stuck to that. By and large, we stuck to that process. We had a process for processing change requests on the design and the construction of the building. You can't just have your contract. We had a general contractor. The general contractor doesn't make decisions around the design of the building. We had a process with board involvement and committee involvement on how changes to the design were made. if we didn't have process, I can't even imagine how haywire this whole project would have gone. Pretty strong discipline. We had process around art that went into the building. We had a process for everything had to follow the process. And that I felt like that was sort of my key to my job was making sure the processes were followed.
I have another question. So how do you maintain a sense of urgency? Because even if you have deadlines, I mean, I'm as guilty as everybody of procrastinating or saying, oh, well, that's just a big thing. How did you guys overcome that? And what do you advise about that procrastination?
Well, we actually had deadlines. Like if we didn't, like we would have lost funding if we didn't meet the deadlines. If we had extended the deadline for grand opening, we would have lost our keynote speaker. We had speakers and people flying in, and we had a big deal. We had a very famous author. Maybe you've heard of him, Tim Egan. He's a big Northwest author who came to did a talk that night about one of his books. We would have lost all that if we had changed the date. We would have lost all of this planning. So we actually did have deadlines, and I did not make friends at the library district. I'll tell you that. I because they really wanted to push out. They were not happy that we would not push out the deadline. They did not feel like they had enough time to open a library that they wanted to open. And I just had to say, you know what, figure it out. We are opening on this date. So I think it comes from within. I mean, you have to commit it to yourself, knowing what's really urgent. And then you know what things are not truly urgent and can slide. And that's judgment. And that comes with judgment over time. Things that not everything it does require urgency, but you need to know what things really do require urgency, and then use your judgment on the things that can slide. And if they keep sliding and you end up not doing them, you probably don't need to do them anyway.
Jill, there have been commentators who've talked about generational attitudes toward work, management, team building, contrasting people who are much older, came from a more traditional corporate setting, versus people who are more contemporary and work on social media, from coffee shops, mostly by themselves. Did you find any generational differences in approaching the project that you had to work through? Or did you have to reconcile anything? Did you have to change did anyone have to change, for example, the way they were used to doing things in order to be successful?
I mentioned that we had a tool, Slack type tool. It wasn't Slack, but it was like that. I had to give that up because our board just couldn't do it. It was too different. It was too much of a learning curve for them to adopt a new technology. They just were happy with email. So we did a lot of email. I thought it was a big win when we could get them on using Google Docs instead of document sharing over email. Not really, Wes. I mean, we had such a short amount of time. That's what we just had to focus on, what we had to get done by these deadlines. We didn't really have too much of, I know what you're talking about because I faced it in my consulting career. This next generation behind is a very different, maybe work ethic. I don't know. That's probably not fair, but different approach to work and balance than I certainly had. We all had to work really hard, really fast to get this thing done. And so, no, I don't think that we really faced a whole lot of this. Sorry, that was not one of our challenges.
I have a question. Because you mentioned when sticking with deadlines and such that you didn't necessarily make friends. And I understand that from some perspective. I had a consulting background as well. And I know sometimes even when you tell the client what they need to do, they don't necessarily like you for that. So I totally understand that. But how do you kind of, I guess, how do you deal with that in your career? I think maybe I'm just at a point where I don't necessarily take it personally, but it's like, you know, I want everyone to like me. Like, I don't want to make people upset because then I have to still work with them. Like, how do you balance being assertive and, you know, kind of drawing those lines with still having to work with those people?
That could be an hour-long talk right there with that. But I think to really super summarize is that focus on the vision. Like, so even though I didn't make friends with the library district, we shared the same vision. We wanted to open a library for our community, and they shared that vision. So with every conversation, we acknowledged, look, we're all trying to do the same thing, which is provide resources to underserved people in our community and provide this infrastructure to make us all more successful. Libraries reach every demographic, by the way. So that's first and foremost, is make sure that you are all pointed in the same direction. And then maintain professionalism. It's not personal. Oh, I guess
you're good.
You're good. Keep going.
Okay. None of this was personal, and I'd be the first to admit, so what some of my mistakes was because in the heat of the moment, I got pretty emotional about some of these things because I knew what was on the line. I had the big picture, and I probably wasn't as professional as I could have been, you know, a few times. So then you go back and you say you're sorry, and you try again, and you repair the relationship, but you constantly communicating. We're all trying to do the right thing. And that is absolutely true. There's no personal agenda for me in this. The people that I worked with in the library district didn't have a personal thing against me. It was just, we're all trying to do the right thing. And how are we going to get there? And so I'm the point person. It was all on my shoulders, and I felt hugely responsible. So I powered through it. But I also have to work with these people, or the library district is there for the long run. So I had to maintain that relationship. Super important. We don't want a bad relationship with our library district, because they're there. That's our librarian. That's our books. That determines what our library experience actually is. So you don't want to tick those people off. And so you're just constantly remembering that and being assertive, but also learning to give and take a little bit. But on those things, back to the earlier question about how do you maintain these deadlines and urgency, you got to know those few things that are essential and let other things go so that you're not fighting on every single thing. And so that, I did make concessions on other things with the library district. So it wasn't always my way or the highway.
I think remembering that the core end goal could apply to almost everything we've talked about here, from this to the deadlines to, different working styles. That's a really good point.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jill. This was a really great presentation. We have a lot of library supporters on listening tonight. So big fans of libraries. Absolutely. They made a huge difference in my life. Especially my childhood. And I think we all learned a lot about just business and life in general too. So we're going to wrap up tonight the way we always do with the Rotary 4-way test. So I'll give everybody a second to come off mute. And Jill, feel free to join in with us as it's on the screen. So the 4-way test are the things we think say or do first.
Is it the truth?
Is it the truth?
Second.
Is it
fair to all concerned?
Third, will it build
goodwill and
better friendships? And fourth, will it be beneficial to all concerned? Awesome. Y'all have a great evening, rest of your evening. Wes, get to bed. I know you need some sleep. Thank you again, Jill, and we'll see everyone on the next meeting.
All right, bye. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill.
Bye. Thank you, Jill.
Bye.
Bye.